Okay, how can I make this smaller? Oh, sure. Yeah, we'll do it that way. Okay, you can see my screen now, right?
Yes.
Okay, so really sorry for the delay.
Let's do it 42.
42 minutes.
Yes. So you have 3 minutes of buffer in the real CTA.
Okay, okay. I thought you expected me to do it in 42. All right, so I will get started then. Thanks, guys. Good morning and welcome to my presentation of Universal Fun Cars. Universal Fun Cars is a premium car manufacturer. They are operating in 27 countries. They have 3 brands. We have to take into account multilingual and multi-currency capabilities. We can use translation workbench, community translation, custom labels for this. However, in some cases, we will have to duplicate certain configuration where translation is not available, such as email templates. The target audience for this project are internal users, external agency users, resellers, influencers, and end customers. The objective is to have a very well often online experience. And as an org strategy, I went for a single org because if I look at the way that they are working, their operating model seems to be a replication type where they have a lot of streamlined processes, maybe not always as shared data. So it still would fit within a single org, I believe. Some of the risks and assumptions that I made were we have a risk with regard to the influence monitoring system, which may exceed its limits in the future. Currently, it seems to be fine. However, if we are adding additional scoring in the future, then it may reach those limits. So I would propose to do a follow-up to the MVP solution, which we investigate the replacement of the influence monitoring system. However, right now, I would keep it in place. Another issue could be the accessing or searching of the information in 27 CRM systems, which could be time consuming. To facilitate this, I propose bringing the customer information from the CRM systems into a Heroku database so we can query over there. Other queries into the CRM system should not be impacted because then we know where the customer is located so we can more easily find the correct one to query. 2 assumptions that I made is one, that the coupon codes are generated in the CRM systems as they are linked to the buying of a car, which is happening there anyway, so that Salesforce only needs to check the information. Another assumption that I made is that the ESB system can manage payment provider communication and security, so we don't have to bring too much of this information into Salesforce and have to worry less about the security part within Salesforce on that regard. With regard to the actors and licenses, we have a few internal users such as the event manager who will be using the Sales Cloud license as well as a Tableau CRM growth license. They will be using orders and managing a few accounts, so Sales Cloud seemed to be a good fit on that end. We also are giving them Tableau CRM growth for the more advanced reporting needs. With regard to the event on-site staff, this can be either internal or external, depending on the event. And if it's an internal staff, then I propose giving them the platform licenses as they mostly need access to custom objects. For the external staff, I would give them the Customer Community Plus license, which would allow them to work also with these custom objects, as well as give access to the Apex sharing that I have foreseen on this end. The PR manager, I would give Sales Cloud, as again, they need to do some account management here, as well as Marketing Cloud, as we will be using certain features of that platform as well. And also Tableau CRM growth for the advanced reporting needs. The marketing director, we would also give Sales Cloud, Marketing Cloud, and Tableau CRM growth. We have a few external users, so the travel agents, I propose giving the Customer Community Plus license, as we may have to have a bit of customized sharing in this regard. And also they have to have access to a few records of the custom object. So yeah, it seemed appropriate. We have the resellers, both user, where I gave the Customer Community license, as they need very limited visibility as well as requirements, only the event registration, which should be fine with this license, and the reseller office manager, where we have the Customer Community Plus license, and they need to manage reseller users, so that's why I gave them this license. We also have influencers who may have to have a bit of additional access, as they need to also manage or at least access marketing materials, so that's why I gave them the Customer Community Plus. And then we have the customer community for the end customers, as they have also quite limited needs. With regards to the role hierarchy, we see that we have a CEO at the top. We have different functionalities below, such as the marketing, the event management, and this should have been moved below here. And then we have sales as well. So with regard to marketing, we have a marketing director per country, and underneath we will have teams to perform the necessary needs. So they oversee countries as well as brands within that particular country. With regard to the event management, they are separated by region. So we have EU, NAM, and China, as I mentioned, unfortunately a bit skewed. Underneath the event management for a particular region, we have event managers for the test drives as well as for the safety trainings. And underneath underneath each, we will have the on-site staff and the external and internal as well. And then the travel agency, which is responsible for the particular travel bookings that need to happen here. So we also have the PR, which is actually right below the CEO. And there we have, again, the division in different regions. And for a particular region, we have the PR managers below the executive. And there they own the influencer accounts, person accounts. So that's why we see this as an external role, because they have the Customer Community Plus. And then underneath the VP of Sales, we have the reseller managers, which are not specifically mentioned in the scenario, but I do imagine that there will be some collaboration there, some division of work there. So I propose that they will own the reseller office manager or the reseller account, and thus this role will be underneath them. With regard to the system landscape, we will have different types of users, as I just mentioned, entering the system. Some of them will be using social sign-on via either Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, or Google. This will use the OpenID Connect protocol, and this entails setting up authorization providers as well as registration handlers for each of those. They will be accessing the communities via that way. I have foreseen 3 communities, so one for the resellers, one for the staff, the event staff that is, and then one for the customers. We also have this hybrid mobile app, which is building on top of the mobile SDK. This will be actually raising or surfacing functionalities from the customer side, as this hybrid app is necessary to allow Bluetooth functionalities and QR scanning. And both this app as well as the Salesforce mobile app will be using the user agent OAuth flow to surface or to authenticate into Salesforce. The Salesforce mobile app will be used mostly by the site staff, event staff, and internal users. And then we also have the resellers who are housed in the reseller identity LDAP, and they will be logging in or using SSO capabilities to get into Salesforce via Okta as the identity provider built on top of the SAML protocol. Within Salesforce, we will be using Conga Composer Box. We also need to have the Marketing Cloud Connect match package installed. And then you see that we also are using Tableau CRM and Marketing Cloud. I put them here on the edge as they are not entirely within the core Salesforce platform. We will also be using Salesforce surveys. And then with regard to core functionalities, we'll be using reports and dashboards, and of course, my domain. And then the communication between Salesforce and different systems, external systems, will be happening via the ESB. So the ESB will be communicating with systems such as Car Connect, ERP, also with the travel booking system, the payment providers, and the website. And we also have Salesforce communicating with the ETL tool to communicate with the different car owners RM systems. These are the legacy CRMs per country. And we have then the data warehouse as well as Heroku, and again, this travel booking system. The communication between Salesforce and these different middlewares will be secured using mutual TLS. And we will also be using a direct connection between Heroku and Salesforce using Heroku Connect. Moving on to the data model, we have, of course, account and contact and a person account as well. We will have different events, and a different event can be part of or is part of a particular marketing plan, which has a specific budget defined. In the event, we'll have a location be linked. This location can have multiple events over the years linked to it. And for each event, we can have certain car models which can be available there. They are, of course, linked to the specific type of car model, which is in our product object, sorry. And then other elements to the link to event is the event stuff. As I mentioned, we can have multiple users or contacts as part of our event stuff. This can therefore be internal or external. If people want to attend an event, they will make sure that they create an RSVP, which has a master detail to the contact. And they can also, if there's any booking that needs to be done, there will be a travel detail custom object record below. On the event, they can also drive certain cars, and this will be captured as a drive linked to a particular event car model, which was available there. And once they have completed the drive, they can answer a survey, which will be captured through Salesforce surveys with the basis survey, then the survey response linked to the contact. I forgot to add the link here. And then the survey subject. So that is the drive in this case. Some other elements which I haven't mentioned yet is if, for example, a customer wants to order a safety training, then they will be actually creating an order with an order product, and we'll have different price books based on the region and the brand, because there will be standard prices set in that way, which will be captured as price book entries, which are of course linked to product as well. Forgot to add that one too. And then once the order is going into the payment phase, we will create a payment transaction. As I mentioned, we're not bringing a match package. We saw this is not possible. So this is the custom object that we have foreseen for this. The rest of the processing will go via the ESB. What else? Of course, we have the end customer. So I mentioned that we have a lot of CRM systems, but we want to be able to actually query the customers more easily rather than checking all of them separately. So we have in Heroku this one unified overview, which is actually exposed to our Salesforce org as a external object, the end customer, and where we have an indirect link to contact. So there's a few large data volume objects which we see, which is RSVP, the drives, surveys, of course. And here you can see a bit of the calculations. Of course, I wasn't able to go with fulfill the complete mitigation needs, but I can explain how I would fill them actually. With regard to account and contact, we see that they are not too big. The only thing that I would do here is have some archival into the data warehouse of those which are no longer active, just to keep a clean org and to make sure that we do reduce the numbers slightly. Events, event attendees, and drives, however, are very large volumes, so we want to tackle those. With regard to the events, it's not a huge number. However, each event can have quite a few attendees. So in order to make sure that we can actually keep this clean, my proposal would be to aggregate certain information on events on a yearly basis and push the event attendees already to the data warehouse before this. If you want to have more detailed information, we can still use Tableau to surface this. And the same goes for the drives and associated surveys as well. So we push this yearly to our data warehouse, and we surface this via Tableau, CRM, and aggregate this on events to keep a bit of an overview. We can also use some custom indexes. For example, on the RSVP, we can put a custom index on the status to allow us to query a bit more rapidly. And same goes for the drives. We can put some custom indexes there as well. One of the ones that I would propose there is maybe the overall score that they gave at the end of the drive derived from the survey. Now moving into the requirements. Sorry. There we go. So we start with the event planning, and we see that event managers can have 3 types of events. So we have influencer test drive, we have reseller test drive, and we have driver safety training. So these can be tackled with different record types. We can have different fields surfaced on page layouts, or in this case, actually even dynamic forms as it's a custom object. We have a marketing director, and they have associated marketing plan, which I would cover as a separate object as a parent of the event, so that we in reporting also very easily can roll up what was the total budget of the marketing plan, how much did we spend on an event basis. So we'd have cost fields, currency fields on both marketing plan and event. On the event, we could have certain fields such as start date, end date, registration, close date. All of these I would propose to have on both the parent and the child event, because we can see here that certain events can be recurring or have multiple iterations. So I would link them, and we would surface both in this case. We would also want to show which car models are being selected. So I initially said asset, but actually in the end, sorry, I went for the car event car model disjunction. And then we can put there also the number of vehicles which are should be present at the event. We can put a number field there, for example. With regard to location, I created this custom object. I did consider going with account, but then we would have account hierarchies. And then, I figured that going with a separate object in this case would be better to also reduce the number of accounts that we have. With regard to the staff working there, this is why we have this staff junction object between event and contact. So as I mentioned, it is master detail for event, so it will take over the sharing from that object, but it will be a lookup to contact, so we can still shield it there slightly. With regard to the role that the people will be executing, there will have a role field, and this will be important later on for our Apex managed sharing. The approved marketing materials, we see later on that these need to be exposed via box, that they are actually kept there. So I would have a specific box folder for this particular event, which can then be surfaced using the box managed package. For larger test drives, we want to make sure they can be co-organized with large resellers. And this is where we would have a lookup of an account lookup, as a co-organizer field on the event, so we can easily show this and also later on surface this in sharing. If there are more exclusive events, then the travel company, which I mentioned in the beginning, will make sure that the travel travel is booked. So then we need to make sure that everything there is tracked. So every email, for example, we need to track. So what we will do is we will have this record in Salesforce for travel details. And then this is linked to the RSVP, so we know who will be going to which event, what needs to be arranged for that, and we can have email to Salesforce to actually track all the emails which are related to this. With regard to the phone, I imagine that they can just log the calls as events on this. I did consider Service Cloud Voice, but it seemed to be a bit much to cover this requirement. It seemed to be a bit overkill. So before we publish, the director has to approve the marketing plan. So that is an approval process on the marketing plan object. And with regard to the communication amongst the staff, I propose to have a private chatter group per event. I did consider here just using chatter on the record, but then it may be visible to attendees, which is of course not what we want. So that's why I propose a private chatter group. With regard to the test drive registration, the resellers employees should receive email notifications with regard to upcoming test drives for their territory. And this is where I would be using Marketing Cloud with Email Studio, where we can very easily segment which events are related to, or sorry, what email should be sent and what the audience should be. Initially, I mentioned service territory because for all this registration, I did consider going with Lightning Scheduler. However, in the end, I decided to go with a custom solution. So it would not be a service territory. Instead, we would have a territory field filled in, or location field actually used to make the segmentation. Searching and viewing events in the territory will happen via the reseller community, which I mentioned, where we will have a Lightning Web component where we can show all these events, and we have a lot of control on what the visibility should be. And we also see that it should be either a list or a map. This will also allow us with the Lightning Web component to cater to both in one swift move. If there are events which are happening on the same location for multiple days, and the participant should be able to RSVP for a particular date and time slot. This will be done by having child events per days, and then we can have different time slots for with a different time slot pick list, either afternoon, morning, evening, those kind of things, and we can tackle it in that way. The PR managers want to make sure that they can create more soft and subjective criteria when creating the list of influencers. So this is something that definitely we can do again in Marketing Cloud as it supports this type of functionality. In addition, we also want to make sure that the scores which are calculated in the monitoring app are also visible in one quick view without having to go back and forth too much between different systems. This would be done by integration number 1, where we actually have a daily batch data sync to bring in information from this monitoring tool into Salesforce and update this influencer score on the influencer account. When they send out the invitation, there should be a link there which will allow them to go to a page where they can RSVP, and they can also on this event page see certain information. So they will go to a Lightning Web component on the community page. We will use a URL parameter to make sure that we know who this invitation was, who is clicking the link. We can use a merge field for this to make sure that this is unique for each invitation that we send. And then on the event page, you can see the marketing materials. We also want to track how often they are downloaded. I would use here Interaction Studio, as it will allow us to capture all these types of interactions. I did consider going for event monitoring, but as these materials are exposed on Box and not as files in Salesforce themselves, I think Interaction Studio is a better solution in this case. There are also some expenses to be paid, which is the travel request, as I mentioned. So once this travel request is initiated, it needs to be also sent to this external system. And this we will do by actually using the remote process invocation fire and forget pattern, where we will create a platform event, and then the ESB subscribe to this event. They can call back into Salesforce using the REST API with JOT authentication and get any details that they would need, and then send that information to the TBS system. Once it's created there, they can get the number back from the TBS system, and they can call again the REST API to update this on the corresponding Salesforce record. If there's any changes to the attendee's name or contact details, this also needs to be kept up to date in the TBS system. So that is going to be integration number 3. Again, a batch data sync from the ETL, fetching changed information from Salesforce and sending it to the TBS system. For those where we see that there are travel requests still open, of course, we don't want to overload them with unnecessary information. We do see that they have a rich web UI, so this gave me an indication that maybe it would be feasible to also use Canvas for this. However, I proposed to go with those background syncs, as it would be quite a bit of information. And in this way, I think they can get a better overview and we can expose it more easily to external users too, as we want, of course, the influencers to see their travel details. The attendee should get an email when this travel booking is created. So we will have a record triggered flow for this with an email alert and an email template. And if the booking is not confirmed, so if they didn't reach out to the travel agency within 7 days before the event, then the team must be notified. So we will have a scheduled job constantly checking whether this travel booking is actually within this time frame, and in the not started, for example, status. We can have a custom index on this status field to just make it easier to query, or make the query performance again easier or faster. We can then send a custom notification to the TBS team to indicate that, hey guys, there's something open here. And we can also use chatter post on the travel details for the attendee to alert them to the fact that they haven't reached out to the travel agency yet. With regard to the test drive attendance, there are different models that can be driven there, and each of them have a QR code. So the idea would be that actually a customer can go to the car, scan the QR code, and based on this, the car should be either activated and showing the person's name, or it should show an error message saying, yeah, you're not allowed to drive this car because you didn't RSVP. So what we are going to do here is we have this hybrid app, which we again need for this QR and Bluetooth capabilities. And then it would call, the ESB, and the ESB would then call Salesforce. So the hybrid app would send the geolocation, the user information of the person scanning the car. So that's something that the hybrid app would know as well as the QR code that it sees. In Salesforce, we can check whether the user is an attendee for this location, again, using the geolocation. And we can create a drive already and return true or false, as well as the contact first name. And that can then be sent to the CCS system, again, via the ESB, to either activate the car or show an error. So as mentioned, we want to track the models that were driven. So that is going to be this integration with I just mentioned and the drive record. And after the test drive, we want to make sure that we can capture the feedback. So here we would use the surveys to make sure that we can have a reusable questionnaire that we can use quite easily on different events. And that also captures certain information about the subject, in this case, the drive. So we also want to make sure that if there's negative feedback by these critical influencers, that this can be tackled in a structured approach as well. So we would have a record trigger flow on the survey response, which would create a case with the event manager as owner and the PR manager in the case team. And then we would have a specific support process to enforce this structured approach in which we should handle this interaction. With regard to driver safety trainings, we see that about 10%, so that would be only, I think, 2.5 million of our 25 million customers will actually attend safety training. The car owners can go to a public UFC website, so we already know that they have one in place in their system landscape. And there they can see which are the upcoming training sessions available for their country. And they should see the training fees. So here we would make sure that actually the website can query this information from Salesforce via the ESB, again, using a remote call-in, in this case, with the REST API and JOAT. And then the ESB will make sure that they can fetch the training sessions and prices from Salesforce. So these prices are the ones that we have in our price books, where we have a price book per country brand combination. So we have these standardized fees. And then the safety sessions are the ones that are the events that I mentioned earlier. If they subscribe, there's quite a bit of a process that needs to happen. So if they enter their email address, we want to make sure that if there is a contact in Salesforce with this email address, they immediately receive a unique URL to register for the selected event. If there is no such customer in Salesforce, then we have to query all the CRM systems to see if there's one there. If there is, we will create them in Salesforce and again send an email with a unique URL. So as there are so many systems, we are actually bringing all the customer information in Heroku. So we just have to query this external object in Salesforce and then use quite a similar approach. So, and if the, and the way that this happens, of course, is we have this integration where the website will actually contact Salesforce again via the ESB. And this will, in this case, be going to an Apex REST service because there's a bit more complex logic. So I think it's more appropriate to go with custom web service in this, or custom service in this case. So they send a contact email address. The Salesforce checks the CRM records via Heroku Connect, and they will create a person account if necessary, and then send out a platform event for the subsequent update that needs to happen. That is, again, this part where we see that if there are customer records created from the CRM records in Salesforce, we have to have this information synced back also into the CRM system, and that's what this particular integration with the remote process invocation fire and forget will do. One minor note on this one is that we have to use a future method, so an async method, to make sure that we don't get a mixed YAML error when we're trying to create a customer user for this particular community user, sorry, for the customer. All right. So once they are registering, we also want to know what their car would be, and what their current car is. So they can have multiple cars. This is again stored in the CRM system. So if they are a customer created from the CRM, which would be a flag on the person account, then we would initiate a screen flow, which would actually call this particular integration using remote process invocation, request and reply with an external service and a jot in the name credential, which would get the vehicle details from the CRM if the CRM user, if the user is a CRM user, and then it will create them as an asset, which will allow them to very easily be visible in Salesforce. With regard to payment, there can be either payment via PayPal or credit card or some other options. This depends on the region. We don't have a managed package to support all of this. So the proposal here would be to have a Lightning Web component and ensure that the ESB actually in real time, so asynchronously, uses the reply and request and reply pattern to make sure that they send the payment information to the corresponding payment provider. And then we get information back from this payment provider, which we will send in the payment transaction record. The information that we will store there will not contain any PCI information. So this will just be the status and the invoice number, for example. And we are here using Apex REST callout because it likely will be a bit more complex information to be sent. So that's why I proposed this technology. We also see that there could be a unique code, a coupon code, which they receive when they bought the car. So this is, again, in the CRM system. And here we will be using, again, a call out using the same type of pattern. In this case, we are going via the ESB to the CRM to fetch this coupon validity. And then once we will also make an update to make sure that it's visible that it has been used. The invoice that needs to be created and the additional information that needs to become visible from the payment processor, all of this, I believe, will be tackled via the ESB. So what Salesforce will do is they will trigger a record trigger flow, which will trigger this integration by creating a platform event to which the ESB subscribed. The ESB will then get the information from Salesforce, which just created an order at the end of this event sign up. And that information will be sent back to the ERP. And in the ERP, we'll make sure that we have an external ID stored back into Salesforce, because we say later on that there could be some issues with too many faulty scripts. So we saw this here. We want to really make sure that this goes where it should go. The on-site staff will be using Salesforce Mobile to check drivers in, and this will be an update that they do on the RSVP record. And once the training is successfully completed, then we will need to make sure that we print a certified document. So this would be done via Conga Composer, which will make it quite easy for the staff to do in one click. We want this certification to be sent back to the CRM system. So this would be, again, using existing integration, but in this case, we will make sure that there's different parameters sent as part of the platform event, which will alert the ESB to the fact that actually a file needs to be fetched and uploaded in the CRM system for this particular CRM customer. We also have some migration requirements. So let me go to the migration overview. So I didn't quite finish. So there will be more systems more source systems, let's say. Either way, what we will do is we will bring all the information from these source systems into the ETL, where we'll have a staging database. There we can go work together with the data stewards and the subject matter expert to clean the data, dedupe it, standardize it, and link child and parent records to each other using the external IDs that we will generate there. Anything that is no longer relevant for Salesforce, no current information, so the historic information we will push to the data warehouse. The information which is current and should go to Salesforce will be pushed in test iterations of 10% on QA, 50% on int, and 100% on UAT. And this will be to first test a bit of the logic, while later also testing the full migration and the performance of this load. In doing these migrations, we will make sure to defer and deactivate sharing, automations, and validations. We will use the bulk API and order by parent to avoid record lock. We will make sure that the migration user has the correct user permissions, such as being able to set audit fields. If there's any hierarchical data, which can be the case for accounts, for example, or users, then we want to make sure that we load them in multiple loads. And we will link parent and child using, again, the external IDs. And in this process, as well as with the daily sync that we will have for the customer information, the reseller information from the ERP to Salesforce, we will make sure that the data is initially there for go live and also kept up to date after. Then the resellers can change their information either through Salesforce or the reseller identity system. And we'll make sure the data that they enter there is synced using the Okta provisioning, Okta sync, to keep this information up to date. The attendance and driving records should be retained for 2 years. So as I mentioned, this is going to be a lot of data, so we will keep it, but we will keep it in a data warehouse, and we will make sure that they can see it using Tableau CRM. The event attendance was previously tracked in spreadsheet, but they want to be able to see the past event attendance or RSVPs also in Salesforce. So again, this will be pushed into the data warehouse in the data migration, but we'll surface it using Tableau CRM. The approved marketing materials are managed in box.com, but we'll make them accessible via the box managed package. And if we want to show them in a custom way, we can do this via Lightning Web Component and API, for example. This will allow us to more easily show it to external users as well. With regard to the accessibility and visibility, we see that marketing directors should see events for their entire region and brands. So considering the role hierarchy, this should not be an issue. We can see that they will see anything that is, or they will of course own any information that they have where they already own or from those. So that visibility, that's owner-based visibility sharing, they should have already. And we'll have public groups per region, of which the different event managers are available, are a part as well. So that way we'll open up the access there. With regard to the event staff, we will put Apex sharing on this, just because it's a bit complex on who should see what and when. This should allow us to open up access within certain timeframes, for example, for the event. So that's how we will tackle the visibility there. And later on, when we see that there's also maybe some different visibility based on the role that people have on an event, we can again make sure that we have this role field to shield off certain visibilities. For example, here we have the reseller who should only see attendees' names. we will make sure that this event staff for their role will not open up any access to child records, and we will have a Lightning Web component to show the names, so that is really limiting what they can actually see. We can do this in the without sharing Apex class to open up only this part. High exclusivity events should only be visible to a curated list of resellers, so we will make sure that the events are, or quite default, is private, and then we can have a sharing set up for the ones that the resellers that should gain access. We will create an RSVP event, an RSVP record, for them already, which can then be the basis for a sharing set to open up this access. For the travel requests, we want to make sure that this is visible to a certain selection of the event staff. And again, we will use Apex-based sharing. And the role in this case will also be the driver for this particular travel support role to have access to these child records as well. And then in addition, we will have the role hierarchy to make sure that the event managers see all the information from their from their subordinates, sorry. Then resellers have to be able to use the LDAP system I mentioned in the beginning. We'll use Okta and SAML for this. Influencers can use Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, social media in short. This is why social sign-on, as I already mentioned as well. And then for the PR managers, they have to be able to maintain influencers in their region. The way I propose this is that they have, that they own the influencers. So that is the assumption that I made, that we have one PR manager working with specific set of influencers. With regard to reporting, we see that the marketing directors should be able to see the budget compared to the events that they have. So we would have budget and quarter fields on marketing plan, which we could then use in a custom report with marketing plans with events, which will be grouped by quarter to get this roll up. The director should also see the total monthly sales of each car. So that is tricky because that information is not in this particular org, but in the CRM systems instead. So that's why we'll have Tableau CRM, which we can then use to bring in data from these external data sources. The PR managers will also need an aggregated view of the marketing budget. And this will again go via Tableau CRM, as we need information from the influencer monitor system. The event managers also need a detailed report on the attendees. And because this is a large number of data, because we see that they need to know what is the role of this person and the last event they attended, and the last event could be a while back. That is again why we'll show, sorry, okay. I have 3 more minutes, I believe. So that is again why we will be using Tableau CRM, because of the large data volumes here and the fact that this information will likely be in Tableau CRM. The same goes for the safety training coupons sold and used. So the sold ones we don't have in this org, so we will surface again using Tableau CRM. And with regard to the office managers seeing the attendance of their staff members, we will also be using a Lightning Web component rather than a standard report. And here, this would be because the this may be also already archived information, as the attendance records is a large data volume. So we will make sure that we can open up this visibility by doing a call out, sorry, to the data warehouse for this historic information. With regard to the governance structure, I propose to have an executive sponsor at the top. Then we have the steering committee underneath, where we have the high-level roadmap discussed. There, the program manager, which is a part of it, will also be leading the Center of Excellence, where we have stakeholders from the Change Control Board, Change Management Board, Design Authority, Data Governance Board, and the QA team. With regard to the environment lifecycle, I propose to have a branching strategy with some corresponding environments being either Scratch or developer sandbox or full or partial copies. And then we would have specific tests of sets being run each time as part of our Bitbucket pipeline up until production. We also have some regression testing being done and other manual tests as well. We will use a set of tooling to make sure that we document this, and we have this history as well of what happened when. And with regard to the methodology, I propose to have a hybrid approach, and this would make sure that we have a more direct input in the development and delivery phase from the marketing stakeholders, as we see that this has been an issue in the past. So we would be able to tackle it more clearly and easily. The external design consultancy will be collaborating closely with the design authorities. They are involved early on in the solutioning, and they also get feedback from the solution architects on whether or not something is possible or what information maybe we should surface. With regard to opening up or increasing the team later on, the Salesforce resources, we would make sure that the design authority is setting standards, documentation, and once these new teams are being added, the team leads will be represented in the design authority. So in this way, we would make sure that we can incorporate this in the existing governance structure without too much additional overhead. Then with regard to the traceability of the changes that we did, I proposed here to have Jira there as our traceability matrix, and our Confluence will be used to have the design and define. So discovery and design, sorry. Yeah, with regard to training the team, so we would have hotfix to catch or to fix any bugs. And this would again go through our entire pipeline to end up in UAT, where we do smoke testing and confirmation testing to ensure that these bugs were fixed before pushing it to production. So that is how it would happen, and that is how we would train the team. And then finally we see, yeah, I ran out of time. So do you want me to tackle this last one too, or?
Yeah, tackle it. It shouldn't take more than a minute or.
Okay, yeah, sure. Okay, so with regard to the spreadsheets and the availability have similar flexibility in Salesforce. This is of course tricky because we have this data structure which is closely governed and which is also very, which we need to make sure is still in line and workable for the integrations that we have set up. So we'll make sure that we have the data governance team closely working with them, and we can have maybe some quick files to house some of their unstructured data. If they really need to have more fields added to a specific object, we can, facilitate this, and we can make it happen on priority perhaps. But I would still advise that the data governance board is still kept in the loop for this data structure changes. And I think then I covered the last one as well.
Thank you very much. I pause. Okay, then I might just start. Hello, Lilith. Are you ready?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, let me start with your data model. Can you please walk me through your justification that you do not have an account and contact large data volume strategy?
Well, the data volume strategy that I have there is just archiving the inactive accounts and customers. So, and I presume that this would be okay. We do have about, if I look at my calculations, I see that we have about 3 million of each, which would be higher if we see that there's more people signing up for the driver safety. But even there, I still think it's feasible within these specific objects, as these are optimized in Salesforce already.
So are you telling you do not need selective queries for them, even when we are at 3 million?
Well, I think it would make sense, yes, but we already have some indexed fields there, for example, on record type, which are indexed by default. So my assumption was that this would be okay, that this would be sufficient.
Okay, but my assumption is there might still be some performance issues. So can you walk me through how to mitigate the performance issues?
Okay, yeah, sure. So if that is indeed an issue, then I would want to see, okay, where are we facing the issue? My assumption there is that this is most on the read operation rather than the write. A mitigation for that could be skinny tables, but then we really have to make sure that is indeed the case, because if we go with that, we decrease the performance of our write operations. So it depends, but I would suggest likely, skinny tables in this case.
And what about custom indexes?
Yeah, custom indexes, I would need to see where we can place them. Let me think. Yeah, one of the places where we could have a custom index is on the region that a certain account is part of. So that would be one that we could use. Other than that, we already have the one by default on record type, so that should be okay. Oh yeah, sorry, the flag on whether they are a CRM customer or not. I think there's a useful custom index to place.
So do you stick with your original answer that we do not need any large data volume considerations for account and contact?
I think thinking back, I think it would be best to have those custom indexes, especially on the CRM flag as well as the region, because those will definitely be queried.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hey, Hubert. Yeah, so I would love to hear a little bit more about integrations. If you can open your slide.
Mm-hmm.
Integration number 12 is what I would like to hear about. Does it mean that generally you're going to make queries via ESB to CRMs and you have like 25 or 27 CRMs, right? How, in this case, this integration is going to work to query the right CRM? And do you see any concepts about performance of making this operation?
Yeah, so in this case, I don't think it's an issue because we know exactly which CRM to query, because in this case, it already is a customer. So the moment that a person becomes a customer with us, we will actually be performing that check. And that's why we have the customers in the Heroku database. With regard to any subsequent queries with regard to vehicle as well as coupon here, we know exactly which one to query because we have this information on the contact or person account in this case.
Mm-hmm.
How would you store that information? Sorry.
Yeah, it's very good questions, but I wanted to ask. Please go ahead.
So where we would store the information, correct?
How and where, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So how would be in this particular process going in integration, number 7, where we are checking whether or not they exist. We are querying the information from Heroku, and we are bringing in, for example, the specific source CRM system, as well as the source CRM ID, and storing that as an external ID on the person account. And that would make sure that we can use this in subsequent queries.
I have overlapping IDs in all of the CRM systems.
If we have the same customer in multiple CRM systems, then
same ID structure, not the same.
I'm sorry, Jan, can you repeat? Because I only heard a part of the question.
We have the same ID structure, say that 27 systems, they have similar ID structure with overlapping IDs, but don't necessarily have the same.
Was it me, or I just heard don't necessarily have the same and then it fell away?
I've got the same, unfortunately.
Yeah, okay, maybe I can.
So,
Lily,
yeah.
Lily, what happens in your solution if you have, let's assume there's 27 CRMs have similar ID structure and a customer exists in one ID exists in more than one CRM system? How do you deal with that situation?
Okay, yeah, okay. So I would solve this actually on the Heroku side already. So there we have Well, partly we can solve it there. So we have this unified overview, this unified database of all our different customers, and we can have an app running on Heroku as well to work with or to identify potential duplicates and work with that. In this case, those duplicates would be identified based on the email address. And then we can indicate, for example, that they are in more than one system. If we see that this is happening a lot, then an idea could be to also bring vehicle and coupon information into Heroku and query that instead of each time having to call out multiple CRM systems. If we see that the customer is frequently being part of multiple ones, that could be okay.
Let's assume the customer, sorry, again, coming back. What if the same, you said you store this customer ID in Salesforce for subsequent queries against the CRM system, correct?
Yes, indeed, yeah.
How do you know to which CRM system which ID belongs?
Yeah, that's so we can have a separate, well, we can use a concatenated ID in our external ID field, which would have a code that we know in our ESB belongs to a particular source system. And then a second part of the structure would be the actual ID of the source system.
So what's your final answer there?
Well, to have this structure in the external ID field, and this structure is constructed in Heroku.
Thank you.
Ernst?
Okay, thanks, Lilith. So there were a few requirements where you suggested using record trigger flow with email notifications. Are there any limitations to be aware of around that approach? And is there anything that you would consider that might change your approach in that area?
Yeah, with regard to the outbound emails via the email triggers, we do have some limitations. So are the email alerts. I think these are, they're specific calculations based on the number of users that you have topped off at, I think, about 1 million a day. So overall, it should be fine. However, if we see that this is going to be a bigger issue, we already have Marketing Cloud in our system, which is built to send mass emails more easily. So we can use Marketing Cloud in this case also for these particular transactional emails instead of just the marketing ones.
Okay. So any other advantages to using Marketing Cloud in that way?
Well, yes, of course, because in Marketing Cloud, you have your own, you have the ability to set up a certain preference center. So it allows them to more easily or more granularly give an indication of which type of emails they would like to receive. For transactional ones, of course, they cannot opt out of all of them necessarily, but maybe we can limit the updates they need to have in this preference center.
Okay, but you would suggest, even with the preference center, that that your solution is to use record trigger flows, or would you like to change that part?
Considering the additional features of Marketing Cloud, I think I would like to change it, yes.
Cool. Okay, thanks.
Can you follow up there? What are the implications of if you change the solution here?
Well, the implication here is mostly that I need to have a mechanism to also trigger these emails within Marketing Cloud. I don't think this can be done with the Marketing Cloud Connect Apex patch, managed installed package, sorry. So I would think that I would need to potentially use the API to trigger this.
Okay, thank you.
Is that true even if you don't need to send them emails in real time?
Yeah, I would have to pass on that one. I think that exceeds my knowledge of Marketing Cloud. I'm sorry.
Cool.
One more follow-up on Marketing Cloud in page 5, test drive registration. They would receive quarterly email notifications. Talk me through how that would work. How would we make it quarterly?
Yes, so I think in this case, we would have to make sure that in our am trying to find a requirement, never mind. So in this case, to make these emails quarterly, we would have in the email studio set up this frequency of the emails to be sent, as well as define the audience. I believe that Marketing Cloud Email Studio has this capability, yes.
And then on the same page, page 5, test drive registration. So page 5, if you just go to page 5 there.
Yeah, they're not they're not paginated here, so I can.
Oh yeah, sorry, test drive registration right there, number 4. For influencers, they would like to manage their lists a bit more granular, talk about segmentation in Marketing Cloud. How would that work?
So in Marketing Cloud, we could set certain attribute groups or populations based on the soft criteria that we would set up, and this we could then use in in that way, in this requirement, to have this list.
Given that these PR managers are working regionally, not globally, you have a single business unit in Marketing Cloud?
Considering the visibility that they need is indeed very, very limited, I think multiple business units would make more sense in this case.
How would that work in the connection to Salesforce?
Yeah, I believe we can still sync the entire information, but I would need to pass, as this is again exceeding my Marketing Cloud knowledge.
And then one last question, the marketing materials, we need to track how often the marketing materials are downloaded from the event page. You stated Interaction Studio. How would that work and how can I report on that data?
Yeah, in this case, we would have to make sure that on our website we have a certain tag or a mini script being run for Marketing Studio, Interaction Studio, sorry. And that would then capture the activities of this particular user on this particular page. And that would also register when this marketing material is downloaded, when this button is clicked, for example.
You have a button if you have the box integration managed package?
Yeah, so that's the issue indeed, because this is a rather public page. I propose to use for this page, the box API rather than the box component, because we're exposing this to external users and they may not have a corresponding user in box.
Do you see an alternative solution for storing the marketing material than to store them into the box integration?
Well, of course, an obvious one is storing them in Salesforce themselves, and then we can make them accessible via that way. However, we saw that in the accessibility and visibility needs, I believe it was, that these are actually to be stored on box. So that's why I proposed the other solution.
Is there a way of replicate files from box to Salesforce automatically?
If we set up, instead of the box managed package, we used Files Connect, we could use replication. However, in this case, I am kind of worried about the size that this would entail of these marketing materials. They will likely be high quality and we will have quite a few events. So I would be afraid of exceeding the limits within Salesforce. So that's why I went with the box managed package instead.
Can you quickly walk us through your the available file storage in Salesforce?
Yes. So the available file storage in Salesforce, you start with that 10 gig base, and then per internal user, you have about 2 GB extra. So in this case, I don't think we have very clear numbers on the total number of internal users. But let's assume that we have about 20,000, then this would mean that we have about 40,000 gigs. So that's in total, I think about 40 terabytes, which should give us a bit of room with regard to static files. However, if we have some videos or GIFs or whatever as well, or we have some printable materials, this will easily exceed that storage.
How many events do you see us have per year?
We have 10,000 a year, but some of those can be recurring. So we may want to have slightly different materials per event in that case.
Okay. Thank you very much. So you talk about the use of a custom event object. Can you walk us through the rationale for using a custom object here?
Yes, of course. So initially I was considering going with campaigns and campaign members, as of course these are standard objects. In some of the requirements, we could even consider maybe also having certain opportunities in some cases. However, the reason I went for a custom solution here is because with campaign and campaign members, we have these are standard Salesforce objects, and they are not available for all external users, which is an issue if we're working with community, customer community users for one. And secondly, also they have very specific behavior and are not that easily syncable with Marketing Cloud either. So that's the reason.
Sorry, the event campaign object is not easily syncable.
Oh no, sorry, my bad. Disregard that remark, please.
Okay. Would there be any way to still allow the customer community users to register for events while still using campaigns for budgeting and so forth?
So we could use campaigns in that case for instead of the marketing plan. I think in theory it would be possible, but I would be wondering what the purpose would still be of a campaign in this case. Because it would not have any campaign members underneath. The campaign members would still be underneath the event unless we duplicate the campaign and campaign members and all this information, which I think is a bit of a hassle. So I would not advise it in this case, no.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hey, so as a follow-up for Johann's question, have you considered to use standard object instead of custom one? Standard event object, I mean.
Oh, okay. For a moment, yes, I did because of the recurring capabilities and such. But in this case, I think, again, because it's a standard object and the way that it would behave, for example, also with regard to the sharing, they want to have some exclusive events. Some events should be open up to everyone, some not that much. I think it would be better to go with a custom object in this case.
Okay, and could you remind me, what are the possible sharing models for a standard event object?
I believe that the standard ones there are private and controlled by parent. And in this case, then the parent would be the records or the object it's related to.
Okay, so end of the follow-up, and let's go to the new question. If you can go to your license slide, please. You already mentioned some problems related to access to campaigns for external users. And what I would love to hear are event on-site stuff which are either internal or external. And you have two different kinds of licenses. Does it mean that you see a reason to have like two different streams of development to expose similar features in community and in Salesforce interface for internal, or how do you imagine like the whole development of features for event on-site stuff in this model?
So for the features for the event on-site stuff, I would use standard capabilities as much as possible, because this is not something that we necessarily need to expose to end users. So also not something where we have the design agency involved in. So, and in that way, we can quite easily use standard capabilities, both in the community as well as in a particular app, for example. We could also have the event staff either on-site or internal, external, both use the community and work from there. That's also a possibility. The only place where I think we would have to make sure that it's a bit more easy for them to work with is when they are checking in drivers. And that's where I had proposed to have this easy button for the document generation and another one for the surveys. And that's the only place where I see customization for them.
Right, but if they're going to work in the community, you mentioned that they are going to use as well Salesforce mobile app. How is it going to work on the community in this case?
Yeah. You're right. So in that case, we may need to have actually a mobile publisher for them specifically for the staff community.
Okay. And is there any chance to have the same license for both type of users? So for example, to give customer community plus your internal employees?
Oh, that way, no, the other way around, we could give them internal licenses, that should be fine, but we cannot give external licenses to internal users. That is not in line with the contractual agreement with Salesforce.
Okay, so if we can give platform license to both type, why have you decided to go with two different licenses?
The reason I decided to go with different licenses is because of the assumption that maybe we didn't want to open up everything in the same way to both type of users. If they work in the exact same way and the visibility for both is the exactly same, then I would go with indeed just one and then have them both use the platform internal user license.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Lawrence, Jan?
Okay.
Yep, I have a, oh yeah, you want to go first, Lawrence? Go ahead.
Sorry guys, my fault.
Could you jump to the integrations, please? So integration 9, I think it was, the payments integration. So you're suggesting here using a Apex REST call out as part of the integration flow. Is there anything that we need to be particularly careful about or concerned about in terms of the information flowing through Apex REST, so the sensitive payment information, and are there any other alternatives that you considered there?
Yeah, one of the things that we have to consider here, of course, are if we're using Apex REST, this will be a post call out that we need to do so we can make sure that the information is not being kept anywhere in the browser. So that's
what about if we have a Salesforce admin? Are they able to see that information?
Well, it shouldn't be. I don't think it should be visible in the debug logs unless the developer messes up. So to my knowledge, it's not going to show up there.
Okay, what about breakpoints, stepping through the code? Do you have any concerns that we might be exposing anything?
Say we do have a sloppy developer who debugs everything. Is there an alternative solution?
Well, if we really want to make sure that this is not happening, then of course we can use encryption. We have a crypto class, for example, that we could use. This all depends, of course, on what is available at the other end. So that would be a possibility.
How would the crypto class prevent me from loading everything into the debug statement?
Yeah, of course, that's a good point. Well, if we use encrypted fields, I guess we could use encrypted fields in this case to make sure. However, my proposal was to just not have any data captured on an object in this case. So just have the information captured temporarily and sent, not even cached or anything, just really sent to the external service to get token from the payment gateway or payment provider back and use that from the in future processes.
Okay. Can I ask another question about the payment integration? If we have a customer that that's paid previously for an event and they come back and they're paying again, do you suggest any mechanism to make that process easier?
If we want to keep payment methods in our system as well to allow this kind of easy recurring payment, then we can store the payment token that we get from the payment gateway, and that should be fine. So with that token, the payment gateway would know what type of transaction to complete. So for example, which payment information is it, PayPal or the credit card, should be accessed in their system in the payment gateway without actually having any sensitive information in Salesforce.
Okay.
Lilith, you suggest to use an external object. Can you walk me through your justification to use the external object, how you expose it to the user in which positions, and how you take care of the security mechanisms?
Yeah, for me, the external object that I have here, this end customer, is not exposed to users at all. The only reason I'm bringing this in is just to allow us to have easy queries and easy access to this full list of end users that are available in the different CRM systems. So I wouldn't open this up at all to end users.
So what's the advantage of having an external object now? What is the justification for external object?
Well, to make sure that we can query more easily, we don't have to do a specific call out.
Okay, what is the downsides of having an external object?
One of the downsides of having external object overall is that we're quite limited in the sharing that we have to do. And also, if we are going to query, then we have to take into account that we do have our OData callout limitations. We can also only query about 2,000 records per callout, but I believe all of this should be fine considering the use case here. One particular part where this may be more of an issue, but even then, is the fact that when we query external object records that haven't been queried before, Salesforce has to actually create a Salesforce ID for them, which is why we only can query 100,000 new records per hour. So yeah.
How much do you see the advantage of having an external object for when we use them only in Apex code, correct? The external object.
Exactly, yes, indeed.
What do you see, what would be the alternative to make it easy for developers to access this data without writing a unique call out each time?
Well, because of the indirect relationship that we have between end customer and contact, we can more easily access any information about this external information via SOCL on the contact or combination using this relationship field in the SOCL queries as well. So that is a huge advantage that we would have, that this is already linked in our system.
Could you find any other way of achieving the same?
Without an external object in this case.
Mm-hmm.
I guess if we have a similar information available in Heroku, this would be possible too. We could do an SQL with foreign keys there too. That would be a possibility.
Okay, so do you stick with your solution of external object?
Yes, because in my current solution, I'm not bringing in the contact into Heroku at all. And otherwise, I would need to set that up and have maintenance there. So I would stick with my solution in this case.
How do you connect the contact? Yeah, okay, never mind. Go ahead. Thank you very much.
I have a question on the accessibility and visibility requirements. Number 3, exclusive events should only be visible to a curated list of curated resellers and their employees. talk about a sharing set. Can you talk me through that? How would that work?
Yes. So the way that I see is that this curated list would actually be RSVP records created by, in this case, it would be the PR manager. And they would actually be creating RSVP records for these for this curated list of resellers. So that would be then the reseller office manager, whose contact would be linked to this RSVP, and we can have a specific status saying invited or whatever to indicate that this is not an RSVP that was created by the user itself, but instead by the PR manager. And then we can have use this lookup on RSVP to match to the contact of the reseller, and in that way open it up. And the opening up can also happen via a sharing group in this case.
Okay. Jan, do you have follow-up question on this, or could I ask something?
Right.
Awesome. So I would love, Lilith, ask you to go to your governance slide. You mentioned that you are recommending to use jest test, but as we know, bringing jest tests generally increase the development time and complexity because our developers must know how to develop them and so on and so on. Could you give some justification why it's worth to make this significant investment to build this automation?
Mm-hmm. A lot of our Lightning Web components will be used to expose to end customers. So it's really, really important that we make sure that they pass all the tests, that they are in line with the code quality that we set forward. Just to make sure that, for example, they adhere to the necessary requirements set forth also by the external agency with regard to the responsiveness, for example, as well as also making sure that we don't have the risk of opening up any potential security risk there. So that's why I would advise this.
That's very interesting because you mentioned about code quality, responsiveness, and security. So could you maybe explain me how exactly jest test works and what they really test?
Yes, so a jest test normally is testing the JavaScript part of your Lightning Web component. And considering in your new Lightning Web components, you can use, for example, query immediately from there. Then you want to make sure that the way that this set up is accessing database information. You don't want this to expose too much.
Okay. And how jest tests can be implemented in your software development lifecycle? So do you expect developers to run them manually, or somehow your pipeline, the CI/CD, is going to run them?
I would make them part of the Bitbucket pipeline, yes.
Okay. And what about the coverage of your Lightning Web components? Are jest tests somehow able to calculate the coverage, or do we need to do it manually?
Yeah, I'm not aware of this part, so I would have to pass. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Just another couple of follow-up questions just on this slide. So you mentioned some kinds of testing, but could you talk about would you be proposing using any test automation tools in addition to Apex tests and jest tests, and where would those fit in the life cycle?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I went through this slide super fast. So indeed, I have automated regression testing, which would also be part of the Bitbucket pipelines, starting from QA and going all the way up to UAT. And the tool that I propose here is Provar as the tool for the automated regression testing.
What sort of thing is that testing?
Well, this can test the user interactions. You can set up certain flows, for example, when you click here, here, and there, this is what should happen. So you can make it quite individual, quite specific, but you can also use them for performance testing.
Okay, and what about ensuring that Salesforce is working well with the website?
those would be, I'm presuming, more integration tests, right? That's what you're asking about, right? The end-to-end?
So yeah, just asking how you ensure that your changes are not breaking existing website interactions. You've got quite a lot of interactions between Salesforce, as well as Marketing Cloud and other systems with the website. So what kind of test tools would you use to ensure that those are working correctly?
Yeah, to some extent, Provar could test this too, but the issue here is, of course, that we don't have full integrations on each environment. So I would propose to have an integrated int environment, integrated UAT environment, but this is not necessarily the case before then. So to make sure that we have this end-to-end test covered for the external systems too. Yeah, if Provar doesn't cut it, I would have to check. I don't know off the top of my head any other tools.
Okay, no problem.
Sorry, I do
so
actually.
You mentioned working Scratch. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I just thought that actually Selenium is a tool that we could use to run bigger tests than just Salesforce. I just thought of that one, sorry.
Cool, that was the one in my head too. So you're recommending using Scratch.orgs for development here. Could you talk about some of the considerations of using Scratch.orgs over sandboxes? What additional tasks do your developers and your DevOps team need to be aware of to facilitate development in Scratch.orgs?
Yeah, so while sandboxes take over the metadata and configuration of, for example, production for Scratch.orgs, this works in a different way. We start from a code base or a branch, and that is actually what should be deployed or created in the Scratch.org. One of the things that we really need to take care of there is make sure that if there are any managed packages to be installed, as is the case for us, for example, Conga Composer, then we need to actually put this as part of our script that runs when we create the Scratch.org to make sure that these are installed as well.
Okay, what about test data? What options do we have for that?
Yeah, with regard to test data for the developer Scratch.orgs, I would propose that we have indeed also part of our post creation script where we can push minor that set of data from a CSV file.
Okay.
The rationale behind using a dev sandbox for integration purposes versus Scratch.orgs?
Dev sandbox for integration purposes or development?
For continuous integration purposes, all of those streams come together. Why the choice for developer sandbox and not a Scratch.org?
Oh, okay. So in the where the streams come together, for those are the QA sandboxes. Those are where the testing will happen. So these are still going to be specific per work stream. The first part where everything is coming together from the different work streams is in the int, which is a partial sandbox. And one of the reasons that I thought it was good to bring it together in this type of sandbox is then we have more storage. We can also have integration set up with different systems. And that is really a good place to make sure that we're going, that we have full end-to-end testing that can happen. We can do the system integration tests as well as the integration tests on that environment.
Okay, if I move on to another topic, Jakub, Lawrence, Johann.
I have to drop soon, if it's okay that we wrap up quickly, because I have to another meeting.